The morning sun cast long shadows through the massive windows of New Geneva Station as Captain Jake Morrison walked down the central corridor. Children's laughter echoed from the nearby recreation halls, mixing with the soft hum of the station's life support systems. Jake smiled as he watched a group of 6-year-olds chase each other around the play area, their feet pattering against the metal floors. New Geneva Station was home to over 50,000 children from across human space. It floated in orbit above Earth like a small city, its silver hull reflecting the blue and green planet below. The station stretched for miles in every direction, with living quarters, schools, medical centers, and play areas all connected by wide corridors filled with natural light. Jake had been the station's security chief for 3 years now. He was a tall man with graying hair and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. The children loved him because he always had time to listen to their problems or help them with their homework. Today felt like any other day, peaceful and routine. "Good morning, Captain Morrison," called out 8-year-old Danny Kim as he ran, past with his friends. Danny was a small boy with bright eyes and messy black hair. His parents had died in a mining accident on Kepler Station 2 years ago, but he had adapted well to life on New Geneva. He was always helping the younger children and making everyone laugh with his silly jokes. "Morning, Danny," Jake replied, ruffling the boy's hair as he passed. "Try not to get in too much trouble today." Danny grinned and continued running down the hall with his group. Jake watched them disappear around a corner before continuing his daily inspection rounds. The station was enormous, but Jake knew every corridor, every room, every hidden corner where children liked to play hide and seek. In the medical wing, Dr. Lisa Palmer was conducting her morning briefings with her staff. Lisa was a woman in her 40s with shoulder-length brown hair and a warm smile that made even the most frightened children feel safe. She had worked on New Geneva for 5 years and considered every child on the station to be under her personal care. "We have 3 new arrivals today," Lisa told her team of nurses and doctors. 2 from the Aurora colony disaster and 1 from the Outer Rim territories. The youngest is only 4 years old, so we need to be extra gentle during the initial examinations. The medical team nodded and began preparing for the new children. This was a common routine on New Geneva Station. Ships arrived every week bringing children who had lost their families to accidents, wars, or diseases. The station was their new home until they could be adopted by families or reach adulthood. In Classroom 7, 15-year-old Katie Walsh was teaching a group of younger children how to read basic star charts. Katie was tall for her age, with long red hair and freckles across her nose. She had been on the station for 3 years after her colony ship was attacked by raiders. Unlike many of the other children, Katie had clear memories of her parents and often felt sad when she thought about them. "See this bright star here?" Katie pointed to the holographic display floating above their table. "That's where Earth is located. Our home." The younger children stared at the display with wide eyes. Most of them had never seen Earth except in pictures and videos. To them, New Geneva Station was the only home they had ever known. "Will we ever go to Earth?" asked a small girl named Lucy. Katie smiled softly. "Maybe someday. But right now, this is our home and we have each other. That's what matters." Down in the command center, Jake was reviewing the daily security reports when his communication device buzzed. The message was from Admiral Paul Bennett on Earth's orbital defense platform. "Jake, we're picking up some unusual activity on the outer system sensors." Admiral Bennett's voice crackled through the speaker. "Long-range scans show what might be Zephyrian ships moving in this direction. It's probably just another patrol, but I wanted to give you a heads up." Jake frowned as he looked at his own sensor displays. The Zephyrian Collective had been causing problems for months now, making threats and demanding that humanity stop expanding into new star systems. There had been several small battles between human and Zephyrian ships, but nothing major. Most people thought it would blow over eventually. "Thanks for the warning, Admiral," Jake replied. "I'll keep an eye on our sensors and let you know if we spot anything." Jake didn't think much about the message at first. New Geneva Station was clearly marked as a civilian facility and protected under galactic law. No military force would attack a station full of children. It would be unthinkable. In the dining hall, hundreds of children were eating their lunch and chatting excitedly about their plans for the afternoon. Danny Kim was telling jokes to his table, making everyone laugh so hard that milk came out of one girl's nose. Katie Walsh sat with some of the older teenagers, discussing their dreams of joining the Stellar Academy or becoming doctors like Dr. Palmer. The station felt alive with energy and hope. These children had all lost their original families, but they had found new brothers and sisters among each other. The staff worked hard to make New Geneva feel like a real home, not just a temporary shelter. Jake continued his rounds, stopping to chat with children and checking on the various departments. Everything seemed normal and peaceful. The station's artificial gravity kept everyone's feet firmly planted on the floor, and the air recycling systems provided a gentle breeze that carried the sounds of children playing and learning throughout the corridors. As afternoon approached, Jake returned to the command center to check the long-range sensors one more time. What he saw made his blood run cold. A large fleet of ships was approaching the solar system, and they were definitely Zephyrian vessels. Worse yet, they were heading straight for Earth's orbital space. Jake quickly contacted Admiral Bennett. "Admiral, we have a problem. I'm reading at least 30 Zephyrian ships incoming, and they're not responding to our communication attempts." Admiral Bennett's voice was tense when he replied. "We see them too, Jake. Get your station ready for possible evacuation procedures, but don't panic the children yet. This might just be a show of force." Jake hoped the Admiral was right, but something felt wrong about this situation. The Zephyrian ships were moving too fast and in too organized a formation for a simple demonstration. As he watched the sensor displays, Jake felt a cold fear growing in his stomach. The children of New Geneva Station continued playing and learning, unaware that their peaceful world was about to change forever. The alarm began ringing at exactly 3:15 in the afternoon. Jake Morrison ran through the corridors of New Geneva Station as red warning lights flashed overhead. Children stopped playing and looked around with confused faces. They had never heard this alarm before. "All staff report to emergency stations immediately." Jake's voice echoed through the station's speakers. "This is not a drill. Begin evacuation procedures now." Dr. Lisa Palmer was in the middle of examining a sick child when the alarm started. She quickly finished her work and rushed to the main medical bay where her staff was already gathering. Emergency supplies, her hands shook as she prepared medical kits for the evacuation pods. "How many children can we get into the escape pods?" Lisa asked her head nurse. "Maybe 8,000 if we pack them tight," the nurse replied with worry in her voice. "But we have over 50,000 children on this station." Lisa felt her heart sink. There were not enough escape pods for everyone. The station had been built as a safe haven, not a military target. No one ever thought they would need to evacuate so many children so quickly. In the command center, Jake watched the sensor screens with growing fear. The Zephyrian fleet had split into 3 groups and was surrounding the station. 30 large warships moved into attack positions while completely ignoring Earth's orbital defense platforms. "Admiral Bennett, they're targeting us directly," Jake said into his communication device. "Why are they ignoring your military stations?" Admiral Bennett's voice was tight with anger. "I don't know, Jake. This makes no sense. We're launching fighters to intercept them, but you need to get those children out of there now." Commander Rick Taylor led the small defense fleet assigned to protect New Geneva Station. His 5 ships were fast patrol boats designed to chase away pirates and smugglers, not fight a full military fleet. Rick knew his ships could not win this battle, but he had to try to buy time for the evacuation. "All ships, attack formation. Alpha," Rick ordered his pilots. "We need to keep them busy while the children escape." The small human ships raced toward the massive Zephyrian fleet. Rick could see the alien vessels clearly now on his screens. They were dark gray ships with sharp edges and weapon ports that glowed with deadly energy. The Zephyrians had come here to kill, not to negotiate. Inside New Geneva Station, the staff worked frantically to get children into escape pods. Katie Walsh helped carry younger children to the evacuation points while trying to stay calm. She could hear explosions in the distance as Rick's ships fought the alien fleet. "Don't be scared," Katie told a group of crying 5-year-olds as she guided them to an escape pod. "We're just going on a special trip. Everything will be okay. But Katie could see the fear in the adults' faces. She knew something terrible was happening, even if the grown-ups were trying to hide it from the children. Danny Kim was helping younger children just like Katie when the first Zephyrian weapons hit the station. The entire structure shook violently, throwing children and adults to the floor. Emergency lights flickered as power systems began failing throughout the station. "Stay together," Danny shouted to the group of small children he was leading. "Hold, hands and follow me." Danny was only 8 years old, but he was brave and smart. He remembered all the emergency routes Jake had taught them during safety drills. Even as explosions rocked the station around them, Danny kept the younger children moving toward the escape pods. The Zephyrian attack was unlike anything humans had ever seen. Instead of trying to disable the station or demand surrender, the aliens fired their most powerful weapons directly at the areas where children lived and played. They were not trying to capture New Geneva Station. They were trying to destroy it completely. Jake ran through collapsing corridors, helping to evacuate children wherever he found them. Pieces of metal fell from the ceiling as the station's structure began to fail. He could hear children crying and calling for help from every direction. "Dr. Palmer, how many have we evacuated?" Jake asked through his radio. "About 3,000 so far," Lisa replied from an escape pod launch bay. "But the launch systems are failing. Half the pods won't release." Jake felt sick to his stomach. They were losing too many children. The attack was happening too fast, and the station was too big. There was no way to save everyone. Commander Rick Taylor's ship exploded in a ball of fire as Zephyrian weapons tore it apart. His 4 remaining pilots fought desperately, but their small ships could barely damage the alien warships. One by one, Rick's pilots died trying to protect the children on New Geneva Station. The main reactor section of the station took a direct hit from a Zephyrian heavy weapon. The explosion sent shockwaves through the entire structure, causing walls to crack and floors to collapse. In Section 12, Danny Kim was still helping younger children when a piece of the ceiling fell on him. "Danny!" Katie screamed as she saw her friend disappear under the metal debris. She tried to dig him out, but other adults pulled her away toward the escape pods. There was no time to save everyone. The Zephyrian ships moved closer to the station, firing constantly into the areas where children were trapped. They showed no mercy and took no prisoners. Their weapons were designed to kill everything inside the station as quickly as possible. Dr. Palmer launched the last working escape pod, with 40 children inside just as another explosion rocked the medical bay. She looked back at the station that had been her home for 5 years. Thousands of children were still trapped inside, and there was nothing more she could do to save them. Jake Morrison was in the command center when the final Zephyrian attack began. 20 ships fired their main weapons directly into the heart of New Geneva Station. The structure began breaking apart as internal explosions chain-reacted through every section. "All stations, this is Captain Morrison," Jake spoke into his radio one last time. "New Geneva Station is lost. Save who you can and get clear." Jake looked out the command center windows at Earth floating peacefully below. Soon, the planet would know what had happened here. Soon humanity would learn that someone had murdered their children. The station broke apart in a series of massive explosions that lit up the space around Earth like a second sun. Of the 50,000 children who had called New Geneva Station home, only 3,000 survived in escape pods. The rest died in the attack, including 8-year-old Danny Kim, who had spent his last moments helping younger children reach safety. The Zephyrian fleet regrouped and jumped away into hyperspace, leaving behind only floating debris and the shocked survivors who watched their home disappear forever. The news spread across human space like wildfire. Within 6 hours, every human colony, space station, and ship knew about the attack on New Geneva Station. The footage was everywhere. News drones had recorded the entire battle, showing the Zephyrian ships deliberately targeting areas where children lived and played. President Amanda Fox sat in her office on Earth, watching the terrible videos over and over again. Her hands trembled as she saw 8-year-old Danny Kim helping younger children just moments before a piece of ceiling crushed him. The president had 3 children of her own, and she could not stop thinking about how those parents felt watching their babies die. "Madam President," her aide said quietly, "the calls are coming in from every human world. They all want the same thing. President Fox looked up with tears in her eyes. War. Yes, ma'am. Total war. On Mars colony, factory workers stopped their machines and watched the news reports in complete silence. When the footage ended showing the broken pieces of New Geneva Station floating in space, something changed in their faces. The supervisor, a man named Bob Turner, spoke for everyone. Convert the factories, Bob said. Everything we make from now on goes to the military. No more mining equipment, no more civilian ships. We make weapons until this is over. Similar scenes played out on hundreds of human worlds. On Titan Station, civilian ship crews volunteered to have their cargo haulers converted into warships. On Alpha Centauri, retired soldiers came out of retirement and demanded to be put back on active duty. The reaction was the same everywhere. Quiet, cold anger that ran deeper than anyone had ever seen. General Carl Rodriguez was in his office at Military Command when President Fox called him. Carl was a big man with gray hair and scars on his face from old battles. He had served in the military for 30 years and had never seen anything like this. Carl, I'm authorizing Protocol Omega, the president said. Full mobilization. Everything. We have. Carl felt his breath catch in his throat. Protocol Omega was humanity's total war plan, created but never used. It meant converting every resource, every person, every piece of technology to the single goal of destroying an enemy completely. Madam President, are you sure? Once we start Protocol Omega, there's no going back. This becomes a war of extinction. They murdered our children, Carl. All of them. 47,000 babies. President Fox's voice was cold as ice. I want the Zephyrian species to cease to exist. Within hours, General Rodriguez activated every emergency protocol in the Human Military Handbook. Colonel Amy Phillips took charge of converting civilian factories to weapons production. Dr. Nathan Brooks, humanity's best scientist, began working on new weapons designed specifically to kill Zephyrians. The transformation was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Luxury cruise ships were stripped down and fitted with missile launchers. Cargo haulers became troop transports. Even small personal ships were given weapons and armor. Every human with hands was either building weapons, flying ships, or training to fight. Commander Susan Hayes set up training camps on every human world. Millions of civilians who had never held a weapon before learned how to use rifles, explosives, and combat suits. Farmers, teachers, doctors, and shopkeepers all became soldiers with one single mission: kill every Zephyrian they could find. Remember why we're doing this, Susan told a group of new recruits. Remember Danny Kim. Remember Katie Walsh crying as her friends died. Remember that they targeted children on purpose. The recruits nodded with grim faces. They had all seen the footage. Every human alive had watched those children die, and none of them would ever forget it. Meanwhile, the Zephyrian collective was celebrating what they thought was a great victory. Their military leaders believed that destroying the human breeding station would make humanity too sad and scared to fight back. They expected humans to ask for peace talks within a few weeks. The humans are an emotional species, said Zephyrian Admiral Klex to his officers. They will cry about their dead offspring for a while, then come to negotiate. We have shown them the cost of opposing us. The Zephyrians had no idea what they had actually done. They did not understand that attacking human children was the one thing guaranteed to turn humanity into something terrible and unstoppable. On Earth, Admiral Paul Bennett worked day and night to organize the largest military fleet in human history. Ships arrived from every corner of human space. Old warships that had been retired were brought back into service. New ships rolled off production lines faster than anyone thought possible. The names painted on the ships told the story of human anger. New Geneva's Revenge, for Danny Kim, Children's Justice, Never Again, and hundreds of others. Each ship carried the memory of those dead children, and the promise that their deaths would be avenged. Katie Walsh, now 17 and one of the few survivors from New Geneva Station, stood in Admiral Bennett's office, looking at the growing fleet. Through the window, the Admiral had adopted her after the attack, and she had asked to serve in the military despite her young age. How many ships do we have now? Katie asked. Over 3,000, Admiral Bennett replied. More arriving every day. We'll have the largest fleet in galactic history within a month. Katie nodded and touched the small photo she carried of her friends from New Geneva Station. Danny Kim smiled back at her from the picture, frozen forever at 8 years old. Good, she said quietly. Make sure they know why this is happening. Make sure they understand that they did this to themselves. Dr. Nathan Brooks worked in his laboratory creating new weapons that had never been used before. Chemical weapons, biological weapons, radiation weapons, anything that could kill Zephyrians quickly and completely. Other human scientists joined him, all working toward the same goal. We need to make examples, Dr. Brooks told his team. When we attack their worlds, we want the survivors to know exactly what happens to species that murder human children. The galaxy watched in growing fear as humanity transformed from a peaceful trading civilization into a war machine designed for genocide. Other alien species tried to offer mediation, but humanity ignored them all. Ambassador Helen Carter, who had spent years trying to build peaceful relationships with alien governments, resigned from her post. There will be no peace talks, Helen announced to the Galactic Council. There will be no negotiations. There will be no mercy. The Zephyrian collective has chosen extinction, and humanity will give it to them. 6 weeks after the attack on New Geneva Station, the human fleet was ready. 3,000 warships, carrying weapons designed specifically to kill Zephyrians, gathered near Earth for the beginning of total war. Admiral Bennett stood on the bridge of his flagship, a massive battleship called Danny's Promise. Around him, officers prepared for the jump to hyperspace that would begin humanity's campaign of vengeance. All ships, this is Admiral Bennett, he spoke into the fleet communication system. We go now to make the Zephyrians pay for what they did to our children. Remember their faces. Remember their names. Show no mercy, because they showed none. The where. Fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying death to every Zephyrian world they could find. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when someone made humanity truly angry. The human fleet arrived at Proxima 7 like death itself. Captain Tony Martinez commanded the lead attack group as they dropped out of hyperspace above the Zephyrian colony world. Below them, 3 million Zephyrians lived in cities that sparkled, like jewels under the alien sun. All ships begin the broadcast, Admiral Bennett ordered from his flagship. Across every communication channel, the same message played in the Zephyrian language. The video showed the final moments of New Geneva Station, with children crying and dying as the station broke apart. Then Katie Walsh's face appeared on screen, her eyes cold as winter. This is what you did to our children, Katie said. Now, we will do the same to yours. The Zephyrian planetary government tried to surrender immediately, but the human fleet ignored their calls. Captain Martinez activated the glassmakers, weapons that had been built specifically for this war. The devices fell toward the planet like silver rain. When the glassmakers hit the surface, they created fires that burned hotter than the sun. Entire continents turned into seas of melted rock and radioactive glass. The atmosphere itself caught fire, creating storms of deadly radiation that swept across the planet. In 6 hours, Proxima 7 was dead. Nothing lived on its surface except the memory of what the Zephyrians had done to human children. Major Julie Anderson led the ground, forces that landed on the few Zephyrian worlds that tried to fight back. Her soldiers wore black armor with the names of dead children painted on their helmets. Danny Kim, Lucy Martinez, Peter Johnson, and thousands of other names covered every piece of human military equipment. No prisoners, Julie told her troops, as they prepared to attack a Zephyrian military base. No civilians spared. They chose this when they murdered our babies. The human soldiers fought with a fury that terrified their enemies. They used weapons that caused maximum pain and fear. Zephyrian warriors, who had thought themselves brave, broke and ran when they saw humans coming. The aliens had never faced an enemy that wanted not just victory, but complete extermination. Commander Steve Walker ran the Psychological Warfare Division. Before each attack on a Zephyrian world, he broadcast the footage from New Geneva Station. He made sure every Zephyrian civilian saw 8-year-old Danny Kim helping younger children escape before a piece of ceiling crushed him. "You wanted to make us afraid by killing our children," Steve's voice echoed across Zephyrian communication networks. "Instead, you taught us that some species don't deserve to exist." The psychological effect was devastating. Zephyrian civilians began killing themselves rather than face human attacks. Their military units surrendered without fighting. Some Zephyrian colonies evacuated their entire populations, running deeper into space to escape the advancing human fleet. Dr. Nathan Brooks' biological weapons proved even more effective than the glassmakers. The diseases he created were designed to target Zephyrian genetics specifically. They spread through Zephyrian populations like wildfire, causing death within days. Entire star systems became silent as the plagues did their work. "Make it painful," Dr. Brooks told his research team. "I want them to suffer like those children suffered." The biological weapons were released on 17 Zephyrian worlds. Within months, over 50 million Zephyrians died in agony as the human-made diseases ate them alive from the inside. The few survivors were left sterile, unable to have children of their own. Other alien species watched the human war machine with growing terror. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions to discuss what humanity had become. Ambassador representatives from dozens of species begged their governments to avoid any conflict with humans. "They have become something monstrous," reported the Andromedan ambassador. "They do not fight wars like civilized species. They fight to completely destroy their enemies." The Crystalline Collective, who had been planning their own war against humanity, immediately canceled all military preparations and sent gifts to Earth instead. The Silicon Empire offered to become humanity's allies, fearing they might be next if they remained neutral. President Fox received dozens of diplomatic messages from alien governments, all saying the same thing. They were terrified of what humanity had become and wanted to make sure they stayed on humanity's good side. But the human war machine could not be stopped. It had been built for one purpose: to kill every Zephyrian in the galaxy. Captain Martinez led attacks on 12 more worlds, leaving nothing but radioactive wastelands behind. Major Anderson's ground forces eliminated Zephyrian settlements on 30 different planets. The Zephyrian Collective tried to use their own civilians as shields, putting children and families in front of their military bases. The humans attacked anyway. Katie Walsh, now serving as a communications officer, broadcast the response to Zephyrian surrender attempts. "You did not spare our children," Katie said coldly. "We will not spare yours." By the end of the first year of war, over 90% of the Zephyrian species was dead. 37 worlds had been turned into uninhabitable wastelands. The few surviving Zephyrians lived in hiding, scattered across the galaxy in tiny groups. The Zephyrian High Command, what was left of it, met in a secret bunker on their last remaining stronghold. Admiral Klex, who had ordered the attack on New Geneva Station, looked at the reports with shaking hands. "How many of our people are left?" he asked his aide. "Less than 10 million, sir, out of a population of 3 billion. Admiral Klex stared at the wall where a picture of the destroyed human orphanage still hung. He had kept it there as a trophy of their great victory. Now it looked like a curse that had doomed his entire species. "We made a mistake," he whispered. "We thought they were like us. We thought killing their young would make them weak. Sir, the human fleet has found our location. They'll be here in 3 days." Admiral Klex nodded slowly. He knew there would be no mercy, no negotiations, no chance for survival. The humans had become something the galaxy had never seen before. A species willing to commit complete genocide to protect their children. "Send a message to any Zephyrians still alive in the galaxy," Admiral Klex ordered. "Tell them to run. Tell them to hide. Tell them never to let the humans find them." The aide left to send the message, leaving Admiral Klex alone with the picture of New Geneva Station. He thought about the human children who had died there, and how their deaths had awakened something terrible in their species. 3 days later, the human fleet arrived at the last Zephyrian stronghold. Captain Martinez used the glassmakers one final time turning the planet into a ball of radioactive fire. Admiral Klex and the remaining Zephyrian leadership died knowing they had brought extinction to their own people. The Zephyrian collective ceased to exist. Their civilization, their culture, their entire species had been erased from the galaxy by humans who remembered the faces of 47,000 murdered children. In the ruins of what had once been the Zephyrian homeworld, human soldiers planted a memorial stone. On it were carved the names of every child who had died on New Geneva Station, with 8-year-old Danny Kim's name at the top. The galaxy had learned what happened when someone threatened humanity's children. The lesson would not be forgotten. The final battle lasted only 3 hours. General Carl Rodriguez led the assault on Zephyria Prime, the original homeworld of the species that had murdered humanity's children. The planet's orbital defenses were impressive, but they had been built to fight other Zephyrians, not humans who no longer cared about their own losses. Captain Tony Martinez commanded the orbital bombardment from his ship, Danny's Vengeance. Below them, the last major Zephyrian city held 2 million civilians and the remnants of their government. The aliens had built massive underground shelters thinking they could hide from human weapons. "Sir, they're broadcasting surrender terms again," reported Martinez's communications officer. "Ignore them," Martinez replied, watching the targeting displays. "They had their chance to surrender before they killed our children." The human fleet used every weapon they had developed during the war. Glassmakers turned the city centers into molten craters. Biological weapons swept through the underground tunnels, killing everyone they touched. Radiation bombs poisoned the air and water for generations to come. Katie Walsh, now 21 years old, stood on the bridge of Admiral Bennett's flagship watching the destruction below. She wore the uniform of a communications officer with a special patch on her shoulder showing the faces of her friends from New Geneva Station. Danny Kim's smiling face was in the center, surrounded by dozens of other children who had died that terrible day. "Ma'am, we're receiving a final transmission from the Zephyrian leadership," a young ensign reported to Katie. Katie took the transmission device and listened to the alien voices begging for mercy, promising to surrender completely, offering anything humans wanted if they would just stop the killing. She thought about Danny Kim helping younger children escape before the ceiling fell on him. She thought about Lucy Martinez crying for her parents as the station broke apart. "This is Katie Walsh, survivor of New Geneva Station." She spoke into the device. "You wanted to break our spirit by murdering our children. You wanted to make us afraid. Instead, you taught us what we're capable of when you threaten what we love most." The transmission went silent. Katie handed the device back to the ensign and watched as the last Zephyrian city disappeared under human weapons fire. General Rodriguez led the ground assault that eliminated the final pockets of Zephyrian resistance. His soldiers moved through the ruined cities with grim efficiency, hunting down every alien they could find. Some Zephyrians tried to hide among the dead. Others begged for mercy in broken human language. The soldiers showed no emotion as they completed their mission. "Remember why we're here," Rodriguez told his troops over the radio. "Remember the children." By evening, Zephyria Prime was silent. The homeworld of a species that had ruled 17 star systems was now a dead rock floating in space. The Zephyrian collective, which had existed for over 1,000 years, was extinct. President Amanda Fox received the final report in her office on Earth. Of the 3 billion Zephyrians who had been alive 4 years ago, fewer than 50,000 remained scattered across the galaxy in hiding. Their civilization was gone. Their military was destroyed. Their worlds were uninhabitable wastelands. "It's over," General Rodriguez reported. "The Zephyrian species no longer exists as a political or military force." President Fox nodded slowly. She felt no joy in the victory, only a cold satisfaction that justice had been done. She thought about her own children, safe in their beds, and what she would have done if someone had murdered them. "What about the survivors?" she asked. "Small groups hiding on distant worlds. They pose no threat to anyone. Most of them are sick from our biological weapons and won't live much longer." The galactic community reacted to the news with a mixture of relief and terror. The Andromedan Empire immediately sent gifts to Earth and signed a permanent peace treaty. The Silicon Collective, offered to share all their technology with humanity. Even the proud Crystalline Federation, who had never bowed to anyone, sent ambassadors begging for friendship. Ambassador Helen Carter found herself in an unusual position. After resigning in protest when the war began, she had been recalled to handle the flood of alien governments wanting to establish good relations with humanity. Every species in the galaxy now knew what happened to enemies of mankind. "They're all terrified," Helen reported to President Fox. "Every alien government wants to make sure they're on our good side. Some are offering to become human colonies, just to guarantee our protection." "And what do they say about what we did to the Zephyrians?" President Fox asked. "Nothing. No one will speak against us, they're too afraid." The memorial service for the children of New Geneva Station was held on the 5th anniversary of the attack. 47,000 names were carved into a black stone monument that orbited Earth where the station had once been. Katie Walsh, now a decorated officer and Admiral Bennett's adopted daughter, placed a wreath at the base of the monument. "We remember them." Katie spoke to the gathered crowd of survivors and military personnel. "We remember Danny Kim, who died, helping younger children escape. We remember Lucy Martinez, who called for her parents as the station burned. We remember all of them, and we remember what happened to those who took them from us." The crowd stood in silence, looking at the names on the monument. Many were crying, remembering the children they had lost and the terrible price that had been paid for their deaths. Admiral Bennett stepped forward to give the final speech. He was older now, his hair completely gray, but his eyes still burned with the memory of that day 4 years ago. "Today we honor not just the children who died, but the lesson their deaths taught the galaxy," Bennett said. "Humanity is a peaceful species. We prefer trade to war, cooperation to conflict. But when someone threatens our children, when someone deliberately targets our most innocent and helpless, we become something else entirely." Bennett looked up at the stars where other alien civilizations were listening to his words. "Let this be a warning to anyone who might forget what happened here. We are humanity. We protect our own. And if you harm our children, we will hunt you across the galaxy until your species exists only in history books." The service ended with a moment of silence for the dead children. As the crowd dispersed, Katie Walsh remained by the monument looking at Danny Kim's name carved in the black stone. "We kept our promise," she whispered to her lost friend. "We made them pay for what they did to you." Dr. Nathan Brooks, now head of human weapons development, stood at the edge of the memorial site with a data pad showing reports from across the galaxy. Dozens of alien species had sent messages of condolence and sworn eternal friendship with humanity. Military buildups that had been aimed at human space were being dismantled. Trade offers poured in from every corner of known space. The galaxy has learned its lesson, Dr. Brooks thought to himself. No one will ever threaten human children again. As the memorial visitors left, Earth continued its orbit around the sun, now the center of the most feared military power in galactic history. Humanity had not sought this position, but the murder of their children had forced them to claim it. In the darkness between stars, a few remaining Zephyrians lived in hiding, telling their children in whispered voices about the species they must never anger, the beings who would burn entire worlds to protect their young. The galaxy was at peace, but it was a peace built on fear and the memory of 47,000 murdered children whose deaths had awakened something terrible and unstoppable in the human spirit.